best-selling Maeve Kerrigan series, twice a winner of Crime Novel of the Year at the Irish Book Awards. She has also won the Mary Higgins Clark Award and has been shortlisted for a CWA Dagger. Her latest novel is The Cutting Place. Brian McGilloway is the New York Times bestselling author of the critically acclaimed D.S. Lucy Black and Inspector Devlin series of novels. He's been shortlisted for Irish Crime Novel of the Year, the CWA New Blood Dagger, and the Theakston's Old Peculiar Crime Novel of the Year. His latest work is The Last Crossing. Andrea Carter practiced as both you're very all good at the waving, I have to say. Andrea Carter practiced as both a solicitor and a barrister before turning her hand to crime fiction. She is the creator of the Inishowen Mysteries, starring solicitor Ben O'Keefe, which will shortly be seen on screen in a TV adaptation. The latest installment is The Body Falls. And she needs no introduction, but finally, Liz Nugent. She's the author of the #1 bestsellers, Unraveling Oliver, Lying in Wait, Skin Deep, and her latest, Our Little Cruelties. She's won multiple Irish Book Awards and just in the last week got a stellar review from none other than the New York Times. So now that we all feel like underachievers, we'll get going. Welcome all. I love Zoom events because you can totally have a nose in everyone's house. I'm going to start by asking each of you to tell us a little bit about your latest book, and the emphasis is on little because there's 4 of you and I've loads of questions I want to ask and we only have an hour. So Liz, I'm going to start with you. Tell us about Our Little Cruelties.
It's the story of 3 brothers who grew up in the same house, the same family, have the same education, but their experiences of growing up are very different, and how they are treated by their mother primarily is very different. So they turn out to be very different men in the end. It opens with a funeral. One of the brothers is in the coffin. One of the brothers put him there, but you don't know which brother is dead and you don't know which brother is the murderer until the very end of the book. Is that okay?
I should have asked you to go last because now I feel like that's put pressure on the other 3. Andrea, to you.
Thank you for that. I get to follow Liz. My latest book is The Body Falls, which is the 5th in the Inishowen Mysteries, featuring Ben O'Keefe, who is an amateur sleuth and a lawyer. And this book features a charity cycle, a town cut off by floods, a body which falls on the vet's jeep, hence the title, and a snake. So if any of those things tickle your fancy, this is a book for you.
If you weren't going to mention the snake, I was, because I just think immediately you're like, I have to find out why there's a snake in a show. Brian, we'll come to you next.
Okay. My latest one is The Last Crossing. 3 friends who have murdered somebody 30 years earlier return to the woods where they buried them to see if they can remember where they hid the body.
It's almost like you lot do this for a living. You're so good. Jane, finally.
I'm going to ruin everything by stumbling my way through this one very unprofessionally. Like I haven't been talking about it all year. My latest book is The Cutting Place. It is the 9th in the Maeve Kerrigan series, but don't let that put you off. You can start with that one. It's about a journalist who goes missing and turns up in the River Thames in many, many pieces. And she was investigating a gentleman's club, which does not have very many gentlemen in it at the time that she went missing. So Maeve Kerrigan, my main character, is investigating what was actually going on in the club and what were they getting away with.
And we should mention for longtime fans that Josh is there too, just in case they're...
Josh is definitely in it as well. He's, I think, at his best or worst, depending on how you think of him.
Yeah. I like the ending. That's all I'll say. You know I liked your last couple of sentences related to Josh. Anyway, we won't give anything away. So let's talk about first pages and, you know, the importance of hooking a reader, because I think we all know that everyone's attention span for reading took a bit of a hit really in the last year, and we're facing ever more competition to kind of keep people turning the pages. So I want to know, like, how do you approach that? Is it something you think about? Does it just come naturally in your writing? Is it a first or second draft thing? How much importance do you put on the start of the book and, you know, just like some of the things you demonstrated there yourselves with the premise. So Andrea, I'm going to come to you first. Tell us about your approach to hooks in the first pages.
I mean, I think I write a series. So for me, the hook, each individual book in a series has got to stand alone. But there has to be a hook in a series as well, which keeps the reader coming back. So something unresolved, an ongoing arc, you can't, I suppose, you can't have everything resolved at the end of each book. There's got to be something from the past, or so for me, a hook isn't necessarily about the opening page, but about keeping people coming back to read a series and becoming involved in the characters. In terms of my opening pages of this Inishowen mystery are set in Florida, so that's going to confuse people.
Or intrigued them.
I hope so. Yeah.
Brian, you demonstrated a great hook there just in your little teaser, that they come back to see if they can remember where they buried the body. So I think you've already demonstrated you're good at hooks. So talk to us about your approach to, you know, writing that first draft and where you kind of start with the story, please.
I suppose this one was a bit different in that it's the first kind of non-police procedural that I've done. And police procedural generally will start with the crime scene. With this one, I wanted to start with the crime. It's not a whodunit. You know from the beginning who did it. The question is why they did it. And I suppose more importantly, the consequences of what they've done. That's really what I was interested in with this. So I begin with the murder, and you see it happening, and you see everybody who's involved in it. And then it's about kind of unraveling what led to it in one direction and kind of what came out of it in the other. And I think that's really the thing I love about a crime novel, is that you have that kind of dual narrative where even in a police procedural, you begin at the end of somebody's story. And the detective, while they're moving the story forward, are constantly looking backwards. And so by the end of the book, you should work out how you got to the beginning of the book, which kind of gives it a circularity. And with this book especially, I kind of tried to do that with that kind of concatenating thing where one chapter ends with a word that starts the next, and the book ends with the line that began the book, and just gives it that kind of shape that all crime novels, I think, have anyway. But this was just about kind of formalizing it. So the opening of this kind of set the ending of it as well. I generally don't actually think about openings that much. I kind of use them to kind of feel my way into the story myself, just as a tuning fork to kind of work out what I'm doing. But so it's great to hear.
Sorry, you said as well, Brian, that you know who the killer is. I wonder, did you find like a different reaction from readers to that? And I'm asking this with an ulterior motive, because my last novel, you know who the killer is, and there was a lot of like, even though I knew who the killer was, as if that was kind of a, you know, we weren't supposed to do that, we weren't supposed to tell them up front. So I wonder, has there been a different reaction to this then?
It's hard to tell because the book came out the first week of lockdown.
Right.
The entire publishing industry imploded, and every bookshop that was selling it closed down. So are there any readers of it? I'm not even entirely sure about
sure
that.
There are.
Yes,
there are definitely. Yes.
Apart from the very kind,
we've all read it.
Yeah, exactly. I know. And thank you for that. Yeah, I mean, I suppose people just want, everybody who reads crime, they want the same but different each time. And particularly when you're writing series novels, you're aware of that. And I'm sure Andrea would agree, and Jane, especially people who've been writing book after book after book featuring the same character. People come back to it and they don't want it to be massively different.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they want it to be completely different. And that's kind of trying to juggle those two things. So I enjoyed this one just because it was a non-series novel. It was, and I can see kind of why Liz does what she does do it. It's lovely to come into a totally different world each time and go, right, I kind of, this is something new for me too.
And Liz, we'll come to you next because you're famous for your first lines. So you definitely do think on some level.
I definitely put a lot of work into my opening lines, but it goes back to school days really. we had a visiting theatre company talk to us about, they came and they performed like scenes from Macbeth, and they talked about the opening. And I just remember them saying very distinctly, it opens in the aftermath of a battle, like something huge has just happened, and these three witches are there talking about the fate of Macbeth. And so in almost every book that I have written, I start in the aftermath of something, some huge event, some huge incident has just happened. And what I can do in the first page is show you by their actions what kind of people we're dealing with, because it's how these characters react or respond to usually the murder or the death or the beating or the whatever
all the fun stuff, the happy stuff.
It's how they react to it that betrays their character. So you have a good idea from page one what kind of person you're dealing with, and they're usually pretty horrible.
In your novels, no.
Yeah.
I think that's really like good advice for anyone who's looking to write crime novels, is to, you're skipping all the preamble. I remember doing a screenwriting course that said, arrive as late as you can and leave as early. And I think that's what you're doing. You're forgetting the preamble. You're coming straight in and saying, this is what's happened. And
I did that same writing course.
Was it
Mary Kate and Rachel? Yes.
I'm wondering if my editor did the same writing course, because I've written.
We've all done the same.
I have written a prologue in every book I've had published, and each time it has been removed by my editor.
I like a prologue too, but let me tell you, I never write prologue because I know what will happen. I just
think. I'll just call it chapter 1 in future.
I don't even put anything. I just start with the first sentence, and I always get away with it. Jane, what about you? Because you are also a series writer. Although, am I right in thinking there's a standalone on the way?
There is indeed.
Am I allowed to say that, or is that a secret that I've just? Okay.
No. There's a standalone coming in May next year, but I will talk about the series because I think that's kind of more typical. Like as Liz was saying and as Brian was saying, like you come in a police procedural, especially after something terrible has happened. There's usually a body at the very beginning, and I do try and vary the beginnings, because I think, especially if somebody's reading a series book after book after book, you want to kind of come in at a different point in the narrative. And I get bored as well. So I kind of want to have them reacting slightly differently. And I wrote one, I've had 2 different editors for the Maeve Kerrigan series. And one that I wrote for the first editor was The Kill, and it begins at a wedding. And the whole team, the murder investigation team, is at this wedding. And there's a really long chapter where they're kind of stepping around one another, and Maeve and Derwent dance with one another, and it all gets a bit like surprisingly awkward for the two of them. And then they have to go off and investigate this crime that has happened because they are on call. So I thought it was kind of a different way of beginning. My current editor took me to one side at one stage and she said, I would never have let you start that book that way. I would have made you take that out completely. That's not how that book should have started. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's interesting to know. But I probably get more people talking about that scene with the two of them dancing than any other opening, no matter how shocking it is, from any of the other books. Like you can never tell what is going to strike a chord with the readers, basically. And so it was a real rule breaker thing to do, to start a crime novel without a crime and to have it kind of focus on the people instead. But I really enjoyed it. So sometimes I think you have to break the rules and you have to just kind of say, look, this will hook the readers in a different way. But I'm also very partial to a shocking opening. And indeed, The Cutting Place does open with someone finding a hand. So I haven't gone soft.
There's no one dancing at a wedding at the start of The Cutting Place.
There certainly is not. No dancing.
Brian, you touched on it there a bit earlier, the difference between series and standalones. I'm strictly like a standalone girl. I love reading series, but I can't see myself ever writing one. So like what's the attraction? Do you have a preference? Are you ready now to go back to a series after your standalone? How do you feel about the difference between the two?
Yeah, well, actually, the next book, my next book's out in March, and it's a Devlin, which is the first I've done in about 8 years. So, yeah, I mean, I suppose I come into crime as a series reader. So reading people like Ian Rankin and Colin Dexter and Michael Connolly, and for me, the appeal of a series is that sense of meeting an old friend, or re-meeting an old friend every year and getting to spend time in the company of a character that you like. And that's why I kind of love reading them, and that's why I enjoy writing them. But a bit like Jane kind of said, I think we all possibly have quite a low boredom threshold. And I got about 4 books into the Devlin series and went, no, I need to do something else. And then I wrote some of the Lucy books, and then I got 4 books into it and went, no, I need to write something else. And did The Last Crossing, and now I'm kind of ready to go back to Devlin. The appeal of a series is that you have everything ready-made in terms of the world. The drawback with a series is that every decision you make, you then have to live with for the rest of the series and for every book that comes after it. And you have to remember everything. And so in the first book, we were just married, we had kids, kind of young children. So Devlin had 2 young children. And by book 3 or book 4, I was still writing his son sitting on the rug with a Farley's rusk, waving it at him when he came in from work. Somebody said to me, who read the first draft, went, is he not like 6 now? He's a bit old to be sitting with no teeth eating Farley's rusks. And it's that kind of having to go back and remember what age everybody is, and names especially. I've lost track of the number of copy editors have gone, you have a character in that book who has 5 different names. Will you pick one and stick with it? And different spellings of the names. So it's the practical stuff, actually, that I really struggle with. And it's just memory or senior moments or whatever, I don't know, but now I kind of like both, and particularly with the first Lucy book, I wrote it as a standalone and then finished it and realized that I wanted to know more about her and about her story. So it wasn't a conscious decision, it was just when I finished it I felt that's not complete yet.
Yeah. You can just see over my shoulder here above the typewriter, I have a framed print of The Garden of Earthly Delights by Hieronymus Bosch, because Harry is a real person to me, and that's a plot point in my favorite Michael Connolly novel, A Darkness More Than Night. I love him. But enough about my possibly inappropriate love for Michael Connolly and fictional people. Andy, we'll come to you next. You are on the 5th book.
Yes.
In the Inishowen series. So why did you choose to write a series, or did you? Was that just sort of a natural thing that happened?
It sort of happened organically, really. I didn't really know I was writing a crime novel, like a lot of people, and I know Liz was similar.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a minute. So
yeah, okay, I won't answer that question before I've been asked it. I had written 1.5 books by the time I got published. So it was I had an odd kind of way of putting together my first couple of books. My first book was Treacherous Strand, which ended up being the second book that was published. And it was the second book that I wrote, which was Death at Whitewater Church, that seemed to be good enough to get me an agent and a publisher. And so I had this not very satisfactory first book that I had written that I was then able to, with the same characters, that I was then able to sort of edit and very quickly produce book number 2. So I didn't have the book number 2, the second book syndrome. I was lucky there.
How nice for you, Andrea.
Very nice, yes. However, book number 3 was hell. I can tell you that much. It was really, really hard to do that because I didn't have another one in my pocket. So yeah, very, very similarly to Brian, though, I have reached a point after 5 books, even though there is a bit of a cliffhanger at the end of this 5th book that will require me to write a 6th one at some point. I've reached a point where I'm taking a break. I'm writing something completely different. And I think I need to do that because if I write a 6th one, I think my quality will go down. And I will write the same book again. I will write an echo of something I've written in the past. And I realized when I was writing this fifth book I found difficult to write. I'm happy with it, but I found it difficult to write. I found myself writing scenes and thinking, this is a very easy scene to write. Why is this scene so easy? And thinking, yes, it's because exactly like a scene I wrote in book 2, you know, and I don't want that to start happening, you know. It is lovely. I enjoy, if I'm ready to write another Inishowen book, I enjoy starting a new book, walking back down the street of Glendara, shaking hands with all my characters, finding out what they've been up to in the meantime. And if that is happening, then it's working. And I'm excited to be there again and meeting old friends, as Brian says. But if it's hard work, then I need to pull back from it and take a break. And so I'm doing that now. So I'm writing something completely different now. Sorry, that was a very long answer. You told us.
That's totally fine. That's totally fine. And sort of, you know, coming on from that, Jane, do you ever feel like I never want to meet these people again? And if one more person says to me, I can't wait for the next, do you ever feel constrained by this world that you've created that so many people want to spend more time in?
I don't want to sound like a goody two shoes, but I feel so
okay.
lucky. I really do, because like I get to write these characters who I really enjoy writing. They have, I think, because they have a good sense of humor. Like a lot of the characters in it are quite fun to write. So I'm not bored of, you know, like I can get bored with setting it up, but I'm not bored with the characters. And I think that really helps, because I love going back to them. And I've just been writing the standalone, and I would love to say it was an amazing experience and a wonderful break and everything else. But I mean, and
Jane, you've just frozen a little bit there. So
I missed my, happy to be diving back.
We can hear you. Okay, what we'll do is we'll move on. Liz, I'm going to start with you on the next question, and It's almost 8:30, so it's controversy o'clock. We're gonna talk about something a little bit controversial. Not really, because it's just something interesting. I think that, you know, crime is the most popular genre. In 2018, it overtook sales of what we call general fiction for the first time, which includes literary fiction. And we get a lot of tourists in that, you know, we have celebrities who are famous for other things who decide to write a crime novel, or we have authors who were writing in other genres and come play with us because we're the best and we're the most fun ones. But oftentimes you get this weird thing where, you know, they'll write a crime novel and then, to their publicist's horror, will run around and tell everyone, you know, oh, I never read crime before I wrote this. And that's such a strange, that's like a different planet to me, because I write in this genre because it's what I absolutely love and have done since I was way too young to be reading this genre. And Liz, I know you didn't sit down. Jane is back. Hello. I know you didn't sit down to write. That's okay. You didn't sit down to write a crime novel. Like you just sat down to write Unraveling Oliver, and later kind of was told that that's what it was, and then discovered a love of crime fiction. But I suppose my question, I'm going to put this to all of you so you can be thinking about it while Liz sets us off, is, do you think it's important to be familiar with the genre you're writing in? And if so, why? And if you're not at all, does that have benefits, or, you know, how do you feel? So Liz, off you go.
Yeah, it's a tough question to answer because I was one of those who, like, I didn't go around saying, like, boasting about the fact that I never read crime, but the fact is I hadn't read a lot of crime, in fact, very little. And because I had sort of been conditioned to read literary fiction by teachers in school, and, you know, the books that would have been in my house, and, you know, so when I went to write a book, I just wrote the book that was in me. Genre didn't cross my mind. And in fact, when it was published first, they didn't market it as crime either. It was only when it was nominated in that category in 2014, that's the first time I realized it was crime. And I thought, oh my God, I better read the other nominees in the category, which included Jane at the time. And I was like, oh my God, these books are brilliant. These books are like, the writing in these is just as good as the writing in the other books that I have been reading. And I was really surprised because I had thought, well, I had dipped my toe into one or two, I'm not going to name them, American crime writers, and really hated the writing and really did not write it, but read it because there were such huge deals and such big deals at the time. But I thought the writing was terrible. But reading the books of my co-nominees, I realized, oh my God, there's a whole world of literature here, of really good writing that I have been ignoring. So ever since then, I've been trying to catch up. I'm literally trying to catch up and go back and read Ruth Rendell, Barbara Vine, Patricia Highsmith. I need to go back and read all of those people because I'm just reading all of the ones that are coming out now, never mind the dead ones. So
but Liz, do you think if you had read those that Oliver would have been different? Like, were you at an advantage in a way? Because like just the other day I saw some advice on Instagram and it was like one of this, just the text, and it said, read widely in the genre you're writing in so you know what's expected of you, which I thought was a really weird, almost kind of clinical thing. Like it just didn't sit right with me. So I wonder, do you feel like the book would have been different?
I don't really, to be honest. I don't think it would have been that different. And I would always advise people to read widely so that if you intend to write, how do you know what your preferred genre is if you've only read one? Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So it was note to self. And then when I found myself in the crime writing fraternity, sorority, I was extremely happy there because everybody in the crime writing circles was just cooler than everybody else.
And we're great crack as well. So it's definitely the right one to be in.
We are definitely more fun and we are more commercial. It's commercially we're more successful than literary fiction writers.
I feel like you're starting a fight. That's
wouldn't dream of
better
it.
than that.
So no, I'm very happy. I'm extremely happy to be part of the crime world.
And Brian, what about you? Like, was it a conscious decision? I want to write a crime novel. And if so, how important was your love of the genre, which you mentioned you came to it through a fan of series? Like, how important was that? Did it play a role in what you decided to write, or did you form your own path?
No, I think I suppose a couple of different aspects to the questions. I don't know if I necessarily set out to write a crime novel, and even with The Last Crossing, when I was writing it, I didn't see it as a crime novel. With each of the books, you just want to write a book about interesting characters who have a story that you want to tell. And to my mind, crime or literary or anything else is simply a label in a bookshop. It's simply a way for someone to go, yeah, that goes on that shelf, but this one doesn't. This one goes over here. And I think the best writers will quite often merge all of them. Liz has already talked about Macbeth. I truly feel that crime writing today is our iteration of tragedy. It's exactly the same form. It's doing the same thing. It's evoking the same kind of cathartic response. In terms of certain writers who come out and boast about not knowing anything about the genre, I'm not entirely convinced I believe them. I think we've all seen authors who come out and say controversial things to get attention. And we've all seen authors who you could set your calendar by the controversial thing they'll say 4 weeks before their new book comes out, so it gets lots of traction and lots of stuff on Twitter.
You see the article and you're like, oh, right, it's that time of the year.
Absolutely.
The book coming out,
and so like we've all heard these things, and in a way you kind of accept that, because writing, there are two different aspects to it. There's the physical sitting in your room and creating the book, and then there's the selling the book. And there's some people who create this lovely persona that they want to put out there to say controversial things. it doesn't really interest me. And the debate over literary or crime has never really interested me that much, simply because I think a book's a book, and if it's a good book, I'll read it, and if it's a bad book, I won't. And I've read terrible crime novels and fantastic crime novels, and I've read terrible literary fiction and fantastic literary fiction, and a good book's a good book. But as for people kind of coming out, and as for tourists, I mean, everybody kind of drifts in the other territory. I don't have an issue with that. I think it's unfortunate sometimes that because of the other stuff they've done, they soak up an awful lot of the attention that writers who are maybe starting out and who would benefit from that review space or that publicity or that advance in some instances, that maybe publishing could be a bit fairer in its treatment, particularly of new writers coming in who need that wee bit of support. I mean, like I have been very lucky in that I'm on 11 books now and I'm still being published. I don't know if I was being published now for the first time, if they'd let me get to 11 books. You know what I mean? In that way. I mean, when I started, it was the whole thing about, oh, look at Ian Rankin, it took him 8 books. I think Ian himself would say now, in the modern day, he wouldn't have been allowed to get the 8 books before they started taking off and selling. So I think there's other issues there that I would have with that idea of tourists. I have no problem with anybody writing crime who wants to. I don't believe people who come out and say they haven't read it and they've suddenly written this wonderful book. And if they have, they haven't written that book.
Well, we won't go any further down that road if people not writing their books. Yeah, I mean, Jane, you were in publishing, weren't you, before? Yeah, so maybe you have a different perspective. But when I'm feeling very generous, I know that the sales of these celebrity books actually, maybe I'm being like Pollyanna about it, but you know, they help publishers then take a risk on a debut with no track record. And you know, I'm with Brian in that, like, I just want to write a book and that, you know, I think is good. And I believe readers are just looking for good books, but you don't get to do that in the publishing world. Like, everything has to fit into a box. If you want to play, you have to know where you go. So how do you feel about the idea of genre and let's say celebrity books, without naming any names?
I'm a generally very nice and trusting person, and I never I'm just shocked at the cynicism here, frankly. Like, imagine people would deliberately cause a controversy.
Jane, can I point out what you now know I'm going to point out, is that the idea for this whole conversation topic came from your tweet a few months ago. So you started this.
I know, I totally did. I think it's interesting. I think what annoys me, and I hate to sound so negative about it, but what annoys me is when people who read a book by a celebrity are not your regular kind of crime readers. And so they can be bowled over by something that has been done 150 times and 150 times better. And that can be very frustrating if you're somebody who has really kind of worked and studied and tried to do something different, and to see something very formulaic get that kind of, oh wow, reaction. Hard.
Jane, you're freezing a bit there again.
Have I frozen?
I think you're frozen. Well, no, you're back.
Okay,
keep going.
So I just I'm very welcoming to anybody who wants to write crime. I think it's courteous to read around the genre, even if you don't do it after you've written your book. And I love seeing people recommending other crime writers. And that, to me, like, if you're somebody with a big reputation and you can speak about other people's work, you should. That's how you pay back. And that's how you get kind of to be part of the community. And it is a lovely community. It's a very close-knit, small world. So yeah, I think happy to have them as long as they behave.
What a great note. I think we leave that question there. Unless, Andrea, you've anything, you were nodding a bit there when Jane was talking.
Yeah, I think Jane's hit the nail on the head there. I think it's about courtesy. You know, I mean, similarly, I don't mind tourists as long as they respect the country they're visiting, respect the natives, don't just come in and steal all their valuables and then leave. you know. So
Right.
my view is a bit of respect. That's all.
Fabulous. I love the way we've been able to walk a tightrope there of having an interesting discussion with no lasting consequences. Talking about the genre, like, why crime? You know, why do we repeatedly return to crime novels? Just presuming for a second we are making the decision to write them, and you know, we know that's what they are. Do you think you'd ever write in another genre? Liz, I'll come to you first.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I've written a comedy play which will probably now never see the light of day because theaters are shutting their doors and may never open them again. But I've written a play which is it's verging on farce. It's like it's a comedy drama. So yeah, I couldn't have done it in a book. I wouldn't have been allowed to do it in a book. My publishers would not have allowed me to break out of my genre because, you know, Liz Nugent is a certain type of book with sinister, dark characters, and she doesn't. Now I've written a slapstick play just because I could, because I, you know, I finally had the opportunity to write something that, you know, had been sort of at the back of my mind for a while, but I couldn't ever write it as a book, so I got to write it as a play. But as I say, it'll probably never see the light of day now.
I don't know. I'm hanging out like with all this vaccine talk. My sister's getting married in October, so my family is obsessed with the vaccine and when exactly it will be available. So we're saying September at the moment. We're fingers crossed. Brian, what about you? Is there a surprise book coming down the line? Maybe an idea you've heaping in the back of your head?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean, certainly there's no reason why I wouldn't. And as I say, with The Last Crossing, I kind of felt like I was to an extent.
And Brian, can I ask, like, at what point someone, presumably it wasn't you, said, this is a crime novel, Brian, and we're going to publish it as such?
Well, I mean, I think part of it is because, as Liz has alluded to, your publishers will look at you as a certain type of writer. And when you're an Irish crime writer, they look at you as a certain type of writer again, and you only do kind of Irish crime kind of panels and stuff. With this one, it was the hardest book that I had in terms of getting published. It was the easiest I had in terms of writing. I loved writing it. I wrote the first third of it, shared it with some people who straight away said, no, you shouldn't write that. You need to stop writing about Northern Ireland. Nobody's interested. Nobody cares. Shared it with a couple of people then who were very enthusiastic, including Dave Torrance that runs No Alibis in Belfast, God bless him, who read it and went, no, you have to finish this. No matter what anyone else says, you must write this. And then was lucky enough, I was chatting to Jane and Sinead and Harrogate and talked to them, and people like Steve Kavanagh and Adrian McKenty and so on, who even in the writing part of it were going, that sounds great, you should keep going. I couldn't get a publisher for it because of the Northern Ireland setting. It didn't matter that there was a kind of a crime element. A lot of publishers read it and went, love it, but it's Northern Ireland and nobody cares. Or not nobody cares. It's not maybe, perhaps that was a subtext I heard. Perhaps what they actually said was, selling Northern Ireland's tricky. But the thing is, I mean, that's what I want to write about. Those are the stories that I want to tell. And for me, I mean, you started off with white crime. We're at a point in Northern Ireland where we're trying to move forward, but we still feel we need to look back to work out how we got to where we got to. And we don't have a truth commission, and we're not going to have a truth commission. And we've heard this week that the government aren't going to have an inquest into the Finucane killing. And there are so many untold stories and unresolved stories that it's no surprise that so many of us coming from the north especially have felt drawn to the crime genre, because as I said earlier, crime is about moving forward but looking back and trying to learn what got us to the point where we started from. So I suppose for me, writing about Northern Ireland crime was the obvious form and the obvious vehicle. So at the minute, I still love writing crime and I still love reading crime. So I have no immediate plans for writing non-crime stuff. But with every book I write, I kind of think, is this a crime novel? I'm not entirely sure if it is or not, but if that's how it's marketed, that's okay. I'm quite happy with that.
I mean, if it starts with people trying to remember where they buried a body, I think.
Yeah, but I mean, arguably anything like The Great Gatsby is a crime novel.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
if we look at it in those terms,
Yeah.
every book that contains a killing or a murder or bootlegging or anything else can become a crime novel.
Yeah, so it's like you could name like a lot of the Engleby by Sebastian Fuchs is a crime novel. The Book of Evidence by John Banville is a crime novel. The Secret History is a crime novel.
Rebecca is a crime novel.
Yeah.
I mean,
Atonement by Ian McEwan could be a psychological crime novel.
Yeah,
which is why it's so hard to believe, as Brian said, when people say, you know, I don't read them, because they're kind of hard to avoid if we go by, you know, that definition.
Especially when arguably the person saying it has written a crime novel before.
That's also a clue.
Yeah, we'll stay on the tightrope.
Andrea, you said that you think, you know, you're going to move away from the Inishowen and that you're not going to write a sixth one. So can you tell us anything about what you are writing? Is it very different? I don't want to. I actually know what it is, but I don't want to say. So I'm going to let you share what you want to share. Okay. But in terms of crime and series, you know, as Brian said, is it the same but different?
Well, firstly, I probably will write a number 6 in the Inishowen Mysteries, just not immediately. I'm writing something different first. And I am writing a book set in Dublin. And it is a crime novel. I mean, I tried a previous novel this year, in fact, and it wasn't a crime novel. And I failed with it, to be honest with you. You know, it's the first. I don't have a novel in a drawer. A lot of people have written 3 or 4 novels before they get published, and I never had that experience. So it was a real jolt to discover that my novel in a drawer appeared at number 6, and it just didn't work. It just didn't work for me. And so I have been working on something different for the last couple of months since that novel went into the drawer. And I think it is the beginning of a new series set in Dublin. But I won't say anything about it. It's harsher.
I will just say I know more, and I'm so excited to read it. It's such a good idea, but I won't say anything.
Thank you.
Jane, yeah, I don't want to sound like I'm stalking you on Twitter, because we keep coming back to things that Jane Casey has tweeted. But I did see something about a Regency novel. Do you want to?
My dream is to write a really kind of inane Regency romance that's just has pretty dresses and dashing men, and I don't know why it's my dream. Like, it's such a weird thing.
It sounds kind of fun. So
it does. It just sounds fun. But I have it's interesting. Like, Andrea, I think that kind of. I think we're always trying with our books to go a little bit further, and I started writing during lockdown. I thought this is the time to work on my side project that I really love the idea of, and there's a historical event that I really want to write about. And I don't want to say too much about it. It genuinely happened. I think it's a brilliant story, and I really want to write it, but I'm not good enough. So that's what I'm sort of struggling with at the moment. Like, I started writing it, and it just sounded like a saga, because I can't really do historical fiction. So I've kind of put it back in the drawer for now.
Okay, but maybe one day. And Jane, I'm going to stay with you, because the next thing you mentioned, the L word there, lockdown. You've frozen again, though. Do you want to see if we can hear you?
Internet connection again.
We can hear you, though.
Missed that.
Oh, you're back again. Okay,
I'm back. I'm sorry.
That's all right. You mentioned the L word. I said lockdown, which is what we were going to talk about next. Now, we had a sort of pre-meeting for this event, and I warned you all that my next novel is set in lockdown, so be careful what you say. But my question is, what did 2020 do to your writing? Like, did it change what you were working on? Did it give you more time? You said you thought you would, explore your kind of fun passion project, and also the $1 million question: how are you going to address it, if at all, in your work? So Jane, we'll stick with you since you brought it up.
Okay. I found it really hard. I think I was trying to run away from lockdown by diving into my kind of passion project, and I thought it would be a really good distraction, but it actually wasn't. I sort of feel inspired by it for the next Maeve book, but in a very kind of indirect way. And it won't be set in lockdown. And I think I'm probably just going to skip over it.
Mm-hmm.
I've already, like Brian was saying about timelines, I've already totally destroyed my timeline for the Maeve Kerrigan series. I think they've had the same year about 5 times at this point.
They're just very busy. They're just
I had a
very busy
reader.
today.
I had a reader go back through it and tell me you lost 4 years at some point, and I was like, I don't know where they went. I'm sorry. Just go with it. Go with it. So that's gone. So I think I can get away with skipping lockdown.
Yeah.
I think that is my instinct at the moment. But it did kind of inspire the next Maeve Kerrigan book in a way, which I think will become clear when people read it.
Yeah.
When I write it.
When you write it, which you will. And Brian, you're an English teacher, so this is just a guess, but I think you probably didn't have too much time for looking for distractions during lockdown. How was it for you?
It was. I got caught up on reading, actually. I kind of had a load of reading that I hadn't had a chance to do, and obviously we were teaching online, and I was still kind of getting out of school, even though the kids weren't in. In terms of the books, it does actually feature the New Devlin takes place in the week leading up to lockdown. I wasn't sure.
I love this because I was worried that like I was the canary in the coal mine and everyone would be like, what is she doing? So this is music to my ears that other people have mentioned it.
I mean, I suppose it just, I don't even know why. Like, I didn't set out to do it. I just, as the story was unfolding, part of the storyline involves Devlin's father. And he gets taken into hospital, and it was that idea about kind of not being able to visit somebody, or the difficulties there. So it's there and it's in the background. It's not a major plot point and it's not a major plot idea. And the book, the main part of the book ends before the lockdown begins, and then the final chapter kind of takes place during it. But yeah, I mean, it's just, it's something that's there. And if you're setting a book in this year, it seemed to me unrealistic to not at least acknowledge that it had happened. I don't know if I will set the next one in the middle of lockdown. I think I'm kind of happy enough that I've touched on it. So, but it just seemed natural to write about it in the same way that if any other major world event had happened around the time that it would be kind of the elephant in the room if you didn't mention.
That was exactly my feeling. Like I felt like if we, because I have a book every year, so you know I write a book in each year, and I felt like if I didn't mention it, and of course it ended up being a lot more than a mention, but I was like, it's people like not using mobile phones, or you know, it's just not realistic. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm actually in awe of Jane. I mean, I think Jane is actually quietly hiding her genius. She's created the 4 lost years of her character, that when she finishes her series, she can go back and do an endeavour and go, and now to the lost years. You go, 4 years to play with it. That is inspired. Actually,
you got me, Brian. I totally meant to do it.
You totally did it on purpose, Jenny. It was this master plan all along.
Galaxy brain.
Andrea, what do you think about lockdown? Because I thought it was kind of funny that back at the start of it, when we were all under the naive impression that it was going to be over in a matter of weeks, that some writers were sort of furiously updating books that were about to go to print, and others were saying, no one's going to want to read about this, I'm never mentioning again, never want to hear about it. But I think, you know, it's the biggest world event in living memory. So do you think you will write about it, and how did it affect your writing this year?
The book that I started writing in sort of April, May, I sort of started when I'd given up on the other book. I started writing this new book set in Dublin. I conveniently chose to set it in 2019, and I didn't know at that point how long lockdown was going to last. But in fact, it has been the most gorgeous refuge for me. So it's set in Dublin. I live in Dublin at the moment, and I can do all of the things in the book that I can't do in real life. So I have so many scenes set in Grogan's pub. I have scenes set in, underground clubs, which I would normally never go to. So I'm doing all of the things that I can't do, and it's so it's become a kind of a refuge for me. And I think it will stay that way. It's a gritty sort of urban story, and so it needs people and it needs uncomfortable, crowded situations. And I think I'd have to scrap it again and start a third book in the same year, and I couldn't face doing that. So it's set in 2019, and it's been my refuge, and I've really enjoyed writing it as a result.
And Liz, what about you? Do you think we're going to see a rash of lockdown novels, and will one of them be by Liz Nugent?
No.
Okay, moving on.
I'm writing one at the moment that starts in 2017. Now I'm conscious that I need to like a lot of my books span entire lifetimes, and I want to wrap this up within a couple of years, because I think they're more likely to make a film out of a book where you don't have to change actor.
Is that something you think about, Liz, when you're writing?
It is now.
Do you really
it is
think
now.
about that?
Yeah. I do consciously think of that because it's been a stumbling block with other books where somebody's really keen about making a screenplay, and a production company really want to get behind it. But then their marketing people come along and say, well, but we're going to need 2 actors for that character. We're going to need 3 actors for that character because, I've taken them from age 5 to 55 or whatever. So as far as lockdown goes, it might suit this book to end at the beginning of lockdown, so that 2 people are locked in a situation that they're forced to be in a situation with each other, which
that's very ominous.
might suit the sort of dark ending of the novel.
Another Liz Nugent happy ending.
No, exactly. Yeah. And that's how I felt. I just think like it's such a good setup for so many things that we love writing about, all those happy events. Yeah.
I used it in the play, which I wrote in kind of April, May, and thinking it was going to be over because the play was scheduled to be on in September 2021. But I used it in the play, in that one of the characters had an affair, but told his wife that he had to self-isolate, but he was having an affair with this very young girl. And but it just, like, there's so much opportunity for story with lockdown and hiding and secrets and people who could be murdered under the guise of having COVID. I mean, there's plenty of opportunity for I'm not suggesting that anybody goes and murders somebody under the guise of COVID.
None of us are suggesting anything this evening. No. None of us are suggesting.
It's an idea that might be used by a crime writer at some stage for
Yes. I think it's ripe for the picking.
Yeah.
Some of the problem pages in the Sunday newspapers are fairly ripe at the moment in terms of lockdown.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Have a look.
Ooh, I must go. We're almost out of time. I do think we've done a great job of staying on time, because those were my questions. But I did ask each of you to have a crime novel that if you were going to give this Christmas, Liz, I'll cut you off. I will cut you off. That was very sneaky of you. You have to pick something else. So what I'm looking for, because we've only a couple of minutes, is the title, the author, and one sentence about why. So Liz, what is your actual book? You're not like...
Honestly, I honestly chose this because I think The Nothing Man by you, Catherine Reinhard, is one of the most original books that was written, crime novels that was written this year. It's extremely clever. It's extremely witty. It's set in Cork. We don't have enough novels set in Cork, and it's just so clever and intriguing and entertaining and dark and gritty.
All right, I'm cutting you off.
I loved it. I absolutely loved it. So there you go.
Thank you so much. That was way more than a sentence. Brian, we'll come to you. What's your recommended crime read?
Well, it depends. In terms of one that came out this year, I would probably be recommending Steve Kavanagh's 50/50. Just Steve has just taken the legal thriller and made it completely his own. In terms of my own Christmas reading that I would be encouraging people at the start of the new year, Claire Allen has a new one coming out that's set in Derry at Halloween. Derry has the best Halloween festival in the world, according to USA Today. And Claire set a crime novel during it, which is just fantastic. And Sharon Dempsey, who's another Northern Irish writer, has a new book coming out at the start of the year as well. Sharon's first one, Little Bird, was superb. This one's going to be as well, I would imagine. So that's my Christmas reading coming up. And I will then be recommending it on, I'm sure, to people in January.
Great. Jane?
Well, mine is one for your book tokens that you get given by your auntie for Christmas. Girl A by Abigail Dean, which is coming out in January. It is.
Is that a finished copy, Jane? Because I think I'm in the back.
No, it's a swanky proof.
Oh, okay.
I
didn't get a swanky
Very
proof.
swanky proof.
Yeah. It's a numbered proof, guys.
What they didn't send me one of those.
But I would say if you're buying before Christmas, I would definitely say The Nothing Man.
Listen, stop it. Go back to
it was the best.
Okay.
It was such a fantastic book.
This is terrible.
I loved it.
Okay, Andrea, if you say The Nothing Man, I'm cancelling our lunch that we're having next week. So what is your your crime novel?
Well, this year I really enjoyed Chris Whittaker's We Begin at the End.
It's really
and
good.
it is a beautifully written mystery, and I think he has created an incredibly memorable character in 13-year-old Duchess Ray Radley, and she's fierce.
Yeah, I absolutely love that novel. Jane was nodding away there as well. Really, really good novel. Lads, that's it. The hour has flown by. I hope it feels for you guys. Thanks everyone for watching. I hope someday soon we get to do this in person. I am going to go watch Celebrity Cyclone, and if you don't know what that is, you're a better person than me. I want to thank Liz Nugent, Brian McGilloway, Jane Casey, Andrea Carter, and Murder One Fest. Thank you and have a great night. We're right on 9 o'clock. I'm so proud of myself. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Well done.
Bye.